Tanu Rabbanan ha'u lefanav minei ochalin borer ve'ochel borer u'maniach ve'lo u'borer ve'im borer chayav chatat. So basically, this Brita doesn't really make a lot of sense because it says that the rabbis taught that a person who has food in front of him, you can select and eat it, and you can select and leave over, but you should not separate. And if you did separate, you have to bring a korban chatat. So the question is like, what does this mean? What is this saying? Because this doesn't make a lot of sense. And then Ula answers, and he says that what it's saying is that when it says you can separate and eat, your intent is for that specific day. And when it says that you can select and leave it aside, your intent is also for that specific day. But if you select for tomorrow, you must bring a korban chatat. Mai ka amar. What does this mean? So Amar Ula Chi Ke Amar Borer Ve'ochel Lebo Bayom Uborer Umeniach Lebo Bayom Ulmachar Lo Uborer Ve'im Borer Biver Chayav Chatat. So basically, Ula is trying to explain each line. That when it says you can select and eat Borer Ve'ochel, it means if you want to select something, anything at all that you're separating from a mixture, it must be from that day, like the day you're going to use it that day. And borer umniach is giving us the same rule. You can select something and set it aside for later as long as it's still going to be in that day. The next part says not to choose from a mixture. Lo yibor is referring to how you can't do those actions for tomorrow. And if you would do that, you would choose something for tomorrow, you would have to bring a korban. Matkiv la rav chista vechi motar le'efo levo bayom vechi mutar levashel lebo bayom. So would you ever say that you can perform any other malacha as long as it's for the same day? No, you would never do this. And like an example is baking, that if you're saying that you're just going to bake, but you'll be using that for later that day, that's still not allowed. So metikif means that someone is going to be disagreeing with this very strongly. Ella amar rav chista borer ve'ochel patcho mikshiur borer umeniach patcho mikshiur ukshiur lo uborer ve'im biver chayuv chatat. So Rav Chista's interpretation, he's basically filling in the blanks, and he's saying that the beginning where it says you can do borer is talking about how you can do borer if the amount you're talking about is less than a shiur. So this would be the amount that qualifies, that makes it an avera or not. So for this rule, the amount is less than a dried fig. Equal to or more than a dried fig would not be okay, and that would then make you have to bring a korban. Matkif la Rav Yosef vechi mutar le'efo pacho mikshiur. So would you ever say that you could perform any other malacha as long as it is for less than the shiur? No, this also gives an example with baking, saying that you can't bake less than a shiur. Chatzi shiur asur min haTorah. Even though we have certain amounts, it's not like doing less than that amount is okay. Ella amar Rav Yosef borer ve'ochel beyad borer uminiach beyad ba kanun be'ubtamchu lo uborer ve'im borer patur eval asur ubnafa ubchavara lo borer ve'im borer chayav chatat. So Rav Yosef believes in the rule of shinoi, that if you're doing something in like an awkward or unnatural way, then that would be okay. So he says that if you perform borer with your hands, and then that's okay. And if you perform it with a utensil that is awkward, like that's not really supposed to be used for separating, then it's only prohibited by the rabbis. If you use a utensil that is meant for separating, like a strainer or something to serve something, then that is prohibited by the Torah, and when it's prohibited by the Torah, you have to bring a korban. Matkiv lo Rav Hamnuna bi midei kanun v'tamchu chatanai. So the Breita never mentions using a utensil. Ella amar Rav Hamnuna borer ve'ochel mituch hafsolet borer umeniach ochel mituch hafsolet put solet mitoch ochel lo u borer ve'im borer chayav chait. So it's talking. So he thinks that it's talking specifically about separating the good from the bad, or the bad from the good. If you separate good from bad, it's okay, and if you separate bad from the good, that would not be okay and require you to bring a korban. Matkiv la Abaye midei ochel mitoch pesolet katane. The text does not distinguish between bad and good. Ella amar Abaye borer ve'ochel le'alter uborer umeniach le'alter ulbo bayom lo uborer ve'im borer ne'asa ke'borer la'otzar ve'chayiv cheta. So Abaye thinks that it's talking specifically about doing something immediately or doing something later in that same day. So if you're doing it immediately, if it's like used to be done immediately, then that's okay. And if it's for later, then it's not okay. You have to give a korban. Why is that? It's because if you do it for later, it's like separating for storage, which is industrial. When you're doing it in a way that you're just living your life, then that's okay. And it's more okay than when you're doing it in a way that's for work. Ruha Rabbanan Kemei de Rabba Amar Lahu Shepir Amar Nachmani. And the rabbis told Rava about Abaye's opinion, and Rava liked his thoughts. For a more in-depth look at the Gemara, I'll just answer all the questions. So, what is the shear of a borer? It's the size of a dried fig. What is the concept of chaski shiur asur min haTorah? That even if something is less than the shiur, it isn't necessarily okay. It's asur derabanan. It's asur according to the rabbis. What is the halachic difference between various borer tools? That forks, knives, and spoons are considered extensions of our hands. Utensils like strainers really do separate, so those are not allowed, and if you use them, they are considered borer. Why does storage matter when understanding the laws of borer? It's because the Gemara is trying to understand the Breita. It is problematic if you are doing borer as an act of storing. So selecting for the purpose of eating would be fine, but selecting for the purpose of storing is not okay. And then what's the halacha? The three ochel mitoch pesulet miyad biyad. Those are the big three. So you can do borer as long as you follow three things. One is selecting the good from the bad. You must use your hands, or like a fork, knife, or spoon, because as we said, those are all extensions of the hands, and you must intend to eat the food immediately. And then there are a few exceptions. So the first one is that you can't get the good part. So if you can't access the good parts of the food, then you are allowed to remove the bad from the good. So example would be like to remove the bad and gross parts of lettuce. Going to eat both things now. If someone else will eat it, then it's not considered bad, so it's okay. using your mouth. If you separate it in your mouth, then that's fine. Example would be to spit out a cherry seed. And remaining good with the bad, if you remove a little bit of good with the bad, then that's also totally fine. Example, if there's a fly in your salad, you take out the fly with a little bit of the salad, then that would be okay. And piles, if you have a pile of things, you can choose what in the pile you would want. Example, if you have stacked clothes in a pile, you could choose a specific item, like which thing you specifically would want. And then scattering mixed items, if you have items that are all mixed together, you can scatter them in a way that separates them. Tosfos says that borer can apply to two edible things, not only one thing that's good and one thing that's bad. Borer ve'ochel versus borer eniach. So you can select for yourself and for others. Rav Chisda seems to have a question on ula. Perhaps if borer is specifically something done for the realm of storage, then less than a shiur is not borer. You are allowed to separate within one type of food if you are distinguishing between the sizes, and it's not considered different enough if the same type of food, so you're just looking at the same size, at different sizes.